site working 24/7 since this incident occurred. We would like to thank our partners who are here with us, our environmental partners actually, the Potomac River Keeper and the team from the Potomac River Keeper Network. Also from our environmental services partners, we have the Potomac Conservancy, Fish of the Potomac, boat owners associations, and representatives from the boathouses along the Potomac. Following today's presentations, we will be opening the floor to questions. If you are on the phone, you can pass your questions to our team, and they will get them to the moderator. Our moderator this evening is a very important member of the DC Water team, and hopefully you've seen her throughout this project as she serves as DC Water's spokesperson for the Potomac Interceptor, Sherry Lewis, who is our Senior Communications Manager. She will be helping us move the program along, especially during the Q&A portion. One housekeeping note, as we are convened with lots in the room, we do ask that you silence your cell phones as we want to ensure that no disruptions occur throughout the presentations. When asking a question, we also ask that you please identify yourself and wait for someone to bring a microphone to get to you. We are committed to getting to as many questions as we can, and certainly we understand that not everyone loves to stand up and raise a question, so there are note cards available if you want to also write down your questions, and individuals can read those out for us. Again, we are grateful that you all are joining us, whether remotely through the various channels or whether in person. We really do value your input, and certainly this is an important conversation as we talk about our shared responsibility of the Potomac River. Now it is my honor to introduce DC Water's Chief Executive Officer and General Manager, David Gaddis, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Good evening. I'm glad to see everyone here this evening, especially members of our community. At DC Water, we value your participation this evening and encouragement, and we hope that you leave here feeling well about what you've heard tonight, and that we've answered a number of your questions, those that we can, and that we've given you the information that is needed. I want to begin by acknowledging what many of you have been feeling since the sewer line collapse of January the 19th. The Potomac River is a shared natural treasure, and the overflow that occurred was deeply troubling for all of us, especially those of us that care about the health and also the well-being of not only DC, but also the river itself, and we all share those concerns. Our actions since the discovery of the collapse have been swift and also demonstrate our shared commitment and responsibility to the Potomac and all of those that use it. Our teams and contractors mobilized around the clock in the sub-freezing temperature and also the severe winter weather to contain the spill and begin the repairs. By January the 24th, we had an emergency bypass in place that stopped the discharge to the river. The installation of the bypass was done with speed, precision, and technical rigor. The Herculean response undertaken by our engineering and also operations teams in the face of variable and also challenging conditions was laudable and is ongoing to this day. Our immediate priorities were containment, environmental monitoring, and also stabilization. Throughout the response, we relied on our federal, state, and local partners to assess water and also ecological impacts. And we communicated with you as we could. We issued daily public updates because we know open communication is essential to maintaining the trust of this community. I know restoring public confidence requires more than just technical fixes. It requires listening. It requires learning. It requires continuous improvement. That's what tonight is all about. An open dialogue with you, our community members, and our partners to discuss both near and long-term solutions this evening. This event highlights the broader reality. The Potomac Interceptor is more than 60 years old, and its failure underscores the need for sustained investment. DC Water has already committed to $625 million in rehabilitating this system as part of our 10-year, $10 billion capital improvement plan. This builds the decades of progress and also including the Clean Rivers project and construction now underway on the Potomac River Tunnel, which will dramatically reduce overflow events. Going forward, we are committed to looking at all sections of the pipe at the Potomac Interceptor and also reevaluating their structural and integrity to ensure an event like this one does not happen again. Let me stress, the January 19th collapse was not in any way compromise drinking water for this region. DC Water continues to deliver clean, safe drinking water that meets all regulatory standards as well. Distribution of clean drinking water remains our highest priority. In closing, protecting the Potomac is not the responsibility of one organization. It is a shared obligation. I am confident that by working together with all of us, our local, our state, our federal, and regional partners, we can strengthen both the health of the river and trust in the communities that we serve. The last thing I want to say is that the DC Water team has worked very, very hard to get us to where we're at today. This was a great opportunity to show how great DC Water and its team is, and they did that with this collapse on January 19th. Thank you all very much.
Could you speak up louder?
Received.
Thank you. What I'd like to do now is to introduce our COO, Matthew Brown, and he will take us through some of the artifacts and some of the issues that we had and some of the fixes that we've made and where we're at today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaddis. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I just want to start and talk a little bit about the Potomac Interceptor. It's an asset that is largely outside of the District of Columbia. It's a 54-mile pipe. It starts at Dulles Airport, and it conveys wastewater flow along the alignment here. You can see it in yellow. It is in both the Commonwealth of Virginia as well as the state of Maryland before it comes into the district line. Flows are then conveyed down to Blue Plains Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant. As many of you know, DC Water operates one of the world's largest advanced wastewater treatment plants at Blue Plains. There's a couple locations that we've noted on this map. In red, the red dot, you'll see the location of the break. And in a second, I'll show you some more specific information about where that is. We've also shown the water intakes for the Washington Aqueduct. The one that is in use is the one that is upstream or north of the red dot. It's a blue dot, and it says Great Falls Water Intake. That is why Mr. Gaddis has confirmed, and the Corps of Engineers has confirmed, that drinking water is not impacted. And then you can see how this infrastructure relates to the DC line. The Little Falls Water Intake is a smaller intake. It is downstream of the break. It's also north of the district boundary. The next slide shows a little bit more detail about the alignment of the Potomac Interceptor. Again, it's a 54-mile long pipe. It ranges in diameter from 30 inches to 96 inches. The area of the break, the diameter was 72 inches. It conveys a lot of wastewater flow. So on average, it's 60 million gallons per day. During dry weather flow, it's closer to 40 million gallons. But in wet weather, it can exceed the 60 million gallons. Again, it was constructed in the early 60s after it was authorized by the U.S. Congress. And then again, the flow is treated at DC Water's Blue Plains facility. And then the next slide shows even more specificity about where the location of the pipe break occurred. So many of you are familiar with 495, of course, and the American Legion Bridge. The break occurred just to the east of the American Legion Bridge. And if you go out there today, you'll see a lot of construction work, both at the break site and then downstream, where crews have been working in order to remove the flow from the Potomac River and get it back into the Potomac Interceptor, which has been an enormous effort. So these are the next slide shows the steps of the response and the repair. Next slide. Okay, cool. The very first thing that we wanted to do was stop the flow of the sewage into the Potomac River, of course. We're DC Water, water is life, and that was really the most important thing. In order to make that happen, we had to remove the flow upstream of the break and put it back in downstream of the break. And I'm going to show you a map of what that looks like in just a second. But essentially, that's what we needed to do. We needed to route the flow around the break so that it was no longer going in the Potomac River. After we were able to construct that bypass, the next step was to investigate and then to begin repair. So we started excavating, brought in heavy equipment, started excavating the pipe, and that's where we discovered that there was a rock block in that pipe. If it had been soil, this activity would have been a much shorter duration, but we had a rock block in that location. And so what we needed to do then was we needed to bring in more pumps in order to stop 100% of the flow so that we could dry out the pipe and get those rocks out. And so that's what took a bit longer. We've been working on that since the beginning of February. On February 4th, we said that we anticipated that this job would take between 4 to 6 weeks. We're on track. We believe that this will be completed by mid-March, and in mid-March, the emergency repair will be completed. There's a lot of work left to be done. As of the time when I walked in this meeting, there's about 8 feet of rock that still needs to be removed. That work will continue overnight. The next thing that needs to happen is that cleaning will need to be done. We have a contractor who is removing soil and debris from the pipe. The next step is that the pipe will be prepared for a coating, what's called geopolymer, which will reinforce the pipe a couple hundred feet upstream and a couple hundred feet downstream, and then flow can be returned, and then the emergency repair is complete. And so while we've accomplished a lot, there is additional technical and complicated work that remains. The next slide talks about our response, and just want to be very clear and transparent about how we address this situation. So we became alerted on January 19th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, that there was movement. We have a camera outside of a facility that's nearby the break, and it alerted us to movement. Upon investigation, we determined that there had been an incident, a collapse, and that was blocking the wastewater, and so it was coming up at a manhole and flowing overland into the Potomac River. And that was the very first thing that we wanted to stop. And so that happened late at night. We had people with flashlights trying to figure out what was going on. On January 20th, the next day, we were able to fully assess the situation, begin working with the National Park Service, mustering pumps. We were able to exercise emergency contracts that we had available in order to get pumps in place, in order to move the flow. We also worked with the Park Service, as I mentioned, in order to make use of the C&O Canal. The C&O Canal at the time was dry, which gave us the opportunity to use it as a bypass to move the flow around so then it can go back into the Potomac Interceptor. On January 24th, Saturday evening, we were able to bring 6 of the pumps online, so 40 million gallon per day of capacity. That significantly reduced the overflows into the Potomac River. If you look across the bottom, there's an indication of the overflow volumes that we estimate reach surface water, so reach the Potomac River. During the flow from January 19th through January 24th, before that bypass pumping was installed, approximately 40 million gallons per day entered the Potomac River. And again, that was what we wanted to stop. So by January 24th, when we were able to install those first 6 pumps, that reduced the flow into the Potomac River from 40 down to about 5 million gallons. We needed to keep working on that because at that point, you'll remember the bitter cold arrived at that point. We had the pumps. And you probably have seen in our shared media wipes that are labeled as disposable began clogging up our pumps. What that meant was when a pump got clogged, we had to take it out of service, and then it couldn't move wastewater, and then crews needed to manually remove all of the debris and then put the pump back into service. We were able to bring additional pumps online. On January 27th, that increased our pumping capacity. That meant if a pump went down, another one was able to be used in order to move the flow, and that largely reduced the flows into the Potomac River. So since January 28th all the way till February 9th, there was about 1.5 million gallons in total, not per day, but in total, that reached the Potomac River. And since February 9th, we have not had any overflows that have reached the Potomac River. And that coincides with, obviously, the pumping capacity and the work that we've done. The other thing that we've done is, in order to deal with that rock blockage, we have to stop all of the flow, 100% of the flow. So there was still some of the flow going through the Potomac River. We have to stop it all. And so we brought in additional pumps in order to make that happen. Early on, we started working on an environmental remediation plan, and my colleague is going to talk about that in a bit. We started working on that 1 or 2 weeks into the incident. We also knew that it was important to be transparent about impacts on water quality. And so we initially selected 6 sites. We've added 2 recently in order to help assess the impact of this incident on the Potomac River. So we selected a site that's upstream, north of the break at Old Anglers Inn, to understand what the water quality was before it reached the break site. Obviously, the break site was selected, and then there were areas downstream: Fletcher's Boathouse, Georgetown Waterfront. We selected a location on the Anacostia River, and the river at the suggestion of the Anacostia Riverkeeper. Anacostia out here is tidal, and so we wanted to understand what impact, if any, the break had on the Anacostia River. Recently, we've also selected 2 sites closer to the break site at Minnie's Island, both on the side closest to the shore and then also in the river. What we've seen, and we publish these on our website every single day, with the exception of weekends when we can't get the information from the lab, but every day that we can get the information, we publish it on our website. The green represents levels, E. coli levels, that are within the 410 recreation standard. So when the E. coli levels are below 410, the information is in green. The levels in red are those that exceed. And you'll see near the drainage channel, the levels have exceeded 410. That's expected because of the wastewater. They have come down. So they started in the 100,000s and are down to the single-digit thousands. And so wanted to be clear about that. The other thing I wanted to point out is there are natural fluctuations of E. coli levels in the river. There are other events. There are CSO events. There is storm runoff during after rainstorms. And so even our own monitoring that we've done after our Clean Rivers project, we've seen that E. coli levels can range from 10 to 5,000 in the Potomac River. Nevertheless, it's important that we show that we're transparent about the impact of this situation. And also, we're showing that some of the very high levels that existed at the beginning of the incident are now coming down, and we think that that's good news. There's a lot of detail on this slide, and I certainly don't expect everyone to understand it, but we wanted, again, to be transparent. And so let me walk through what this shows. The very top line in gray is the Potomac Interceptor. So that's the asset where we had the failure. And in the middle, you can see a red X, and that indicates the failure site. The blue line farther down is the C&O Canal, again, that was dry at the time, and then the bottom line represents the Potomac River. When the failure occurred, the flow from the Potomac Interceptor, the sewage, went down a drainage channel and into the Potomac River. And again, that's what we wanted to stop immediately. And so upstream at various manholes, so there are manhole accesses into the Potomac Interceptor that pre-existed, we were able to install pumps. And the pumps have a capacity now of upwards of 130 million gallons per day. We started with 40, we're now at 130 million gallons per day. They move the flow into the C&O Canal, and then downstream there are flumes, or there are channels, that convey the wastewater back into the Potomac Interceptor by gravity. There were initially two flumes created, and then when we needed to block 100% of the flow, we installed a third flume to make that happen. There's also a couple dams that we constructed downstream in order to ensure that the flow did not go farther down the C&O Canal. And I'm going to show you a few pictures of what I've talked about. The picture to the left is what we found the night of the collapse. And so this is a surcharged manhole. So you can see there was a blockage, and so the water went up and then out and then flowed down this overflow drainage channel. So that's an existing stormwater channel. And that, of course, is what we wanted to stop. The emergency response is what we did that first week. So we brought in, using existing contracts, these large pumps, and each one of these pumps will move about 7 million gallons per day, 7 million gallons per day, so a total of about 20 million gallons per day just at that single manhole. The middle picture shows the dams that we constructed in order to move the flow, to stop the flow and then move it by gravity through this channel. So you can see that channel on the right, and that took the flow back into the Potomac Interceptor. And then the next pictures, you can see it in operation, and some of these pictures have, I've seen them on the local media, so you may be familiar with these. The left is the bypass. So those pipes run from the pumps into the C&O Canal. The plastic sheeting that you see there is where we've covered the historic locks on the C&O Canal in order to protect them. You see the flow into the discharge and then dropping back to the Potomac Interceptor. So again, since February 9th, 100% of the flow has gone upstream, gone into the C&O Canal, and then drops back into the Potomac Interceptor and is treated at Blue Plains. This is a highly recreated area, and so we've installed fencing along the towpath, and so that's the picture that you see in the snow on the right is the fencing in order to keep that recreation asset open. And then you can see on the next slide the excavation, heavy machinery brought in to do the excavation. The men down at the bottom of the excavation manually removing debris, and then a picture of the rock block. And then finally, the new work that we've done in order to stop 100% of the flow. On the left, you can see the American Legion Bridge in the background. That is a new pit with over 100 million gallons of pumping capacity. You can see in the second picture some of those very large pumps. Those are 13 million gallon per day pumps. And you can see the pipes go down to the flow, it gets pumped up, and then over into the C&O Canal. Mr. Gaddis mentioned our work that's planned on the Potomac Interceptor. There's more than $600 million planned. The near-term projects are listed here. The first two relate to work that is near the site where the collapse occurred. So there's a planned project for 10,000 linear feet with two rehabilitation methods. One is called slip line, where you drop new pipe into the existing pipe, and that way you're able to rehabilitate the pipe so that it can continue to convey wastewater. The other application, and I reference this because it's part of our repair method, is called geopolymer. It's sort of a spray cement that lines the pipe and is resistant to corrosive sewer gases. So those are the two methods that we're using for the 10,000 linear feet. And the first one will start as soon as the emergency repair is complete. And then you can see other projects there, an additional 7,300 linear feet for a total of 10,000, some work on Broad Run in Fairfax, and then additional work near Cabin John. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Amanda Zander.
Yep. Great. So we've talked a lot tonight about the actual repair to the PI, which is a huge aspect of this project. The other aspect is obviously the cleanup that we need to do from all of our impacts. So before we jump into that, I think it's important, we've talked about the actual PI itself, the pipe, just to kind of step back and talk about the actual river and the watershed. So the Potomac River watershed is very large. It's about almost 1,500 square miles. It runs through a handful of states as well as the district. So it's really impactful to this entire region. We were looking at kind of what the impact was on the entire river during this overflow event. At that time, the river was actually at a very low flow. And what we're estimating is that at that time, during that event, approximately 2% of the kind of average river flow was made up by our overflow that was going into it. But what we're seeing now is that as we get further away from the event, and as the flows are coming back to the river, so they're about 3 times higher than they were at the time of the event. And what our sampling is showing that Matt talked about earlier is that the bacteria levels are really decreasing pretty significantly, actually. So we're really only seeing impacts kind of at and right near our site right now. And so we are committed to getting this right and cleaning it up, and that's what I'm going to talk about with next. So we've developed an environmental rehabilitation plan We have an environmental consultant that we've retained that's been helping us identify all the impacted areas and work on that plan. And we're working with all of the agencies and decision makers on how exactly we're going to implement that plan and exactly what we need to do. So we've been working with EPA, National Park Service, MDE, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the district to work through those aspects. So when we look at the impacted areas, I know there's 3 areas listed here that we've kind of broken those down. There's actually 4 areas that we're really looking at that we're going to be targeting for cleanup. So 3 of those areas are what we're calling the uncontrolled flow areas. So those are the areas that were impacted during the overflow events. Those areas include, basically there's a drainage channel right by where the break site was, and that runs parallel to Clara Barton Parkway. So that drainage channel was filled up with our flow, and from there it went down under a culvert, right under the C&O Canal, into a tributary that leads to the Potomac River. So those are going to be 3 of the areas. We're going to be focusing very heavily on that drainage channel. We're going to be focusing on the tributary, and we're going to be focusing on the Potomac River itself near our overflow site. The second area is our bypass area, what Matt talked about, where we use the C&O Canal as our bypass. So what we're doing there is we're going to be focusing on once the flow is restored into the PI again, and we can get the flow out of the canal, then we'll be focusing on all the cleanup efforts there. We really want to get started as soon as possible. We've been working on this for about a month. I think we're really close with everyone, hoping to start, as early as we can, even as early as next week. We understand how important this area is to everyone and how much people are going to want to recreate, especially as we get into the warmer months. So just a few things that we talked about how we've been working on this for the past month. Some of the things that we've been doing, we are working closely with the Army Corps of Engineers. They're out on our site right now, and they're helping us install some diversions that are going to basically limit the amount of stormwater that's going to come into the site. So that's going to help with both the repair aspect, and it will also help a lot with limiting any further pollution into the river. Along those lines, we're also going to install a specific pump right there kind of at the head of the tributary that will also prevent any water from further going down into the tributary and then hitting the Potomac River. So we're really trying to pretty much stop any additional pollution to the river. As I mentioned, we've been coordinating with folks regularly, daily, multiple site visits, a lot of meetings. We're expecting that we'll have a special use permit from MPS very soon that will allow us to start the work. We're looking at what's out there so that we know once we actually excavate and remove all the material where we can actually take it, so identifying landfills for that. We are conducting all sorts of meetings. We've been working with MPS where they're going to agree to keep the canal closed. So again, we won't have flow coming in from the upper areas of the canal as we are doing our restoration efforts. And we've been looking at all of the different limits of disturbance. We've been staking those out. One thing that's going to be really important, and as we go into repairing the canal, is trying not to impact the towpath as much as possible. So we're looking at access points that are coming from the Clara Barton Parkway side that will limit impacts to not only use of the towpath, but also will limit impacts to our streams, to our trees, and just try to mitigate those as much as possible. And we are kind of looking at 2 phases of cleanup. So the initial phase of cleanup, we want to start right away. We want to start those in those 3 kind of uncontrolled areas. And then we'll go back, once we're done with the initial cleanup, we'll go back and do all the final stabilization, seeding, restoration that's needed, really closely in contact with MDE and MPS. For the canal restoration, like I said, as soon as we can get that flow out of the canal, we can also start the cleanup there. And then we have, a list of things that we're going to be doing for MPS, restoring the locks, making sure all the historical structures are still in place. And we're looking at getting going as soon as possible, and we'll keep everyone updated as we go along.
Great. So as we move forward, again, we're working to provide the emergency repair in order to get the flow back into the Potomac Interceptor so it's no longer in the C&O Canal. We'll move forward with our environmental rehabilitation work, and then we'll continue our capital improvement projects along the alignment of the Potomac Interceptor. Thank you very much.
All right. Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me in the back? My name is Colin Osborne. I'm the director of the DC Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, and I'm joined by Director Richard Jackson from the Department of Energy and the Environment, and Dr. Ayanna Bennett, who is our Chief Health Officer for the District of Columbia. And what we're going to talk a little bit about is what we're doing on the district government side to prepare, to respond and to continue to prepare through this season. So I'll turn it over to Director Jackson.
Yes, so in terms of the sampling that DC Water is doing right now, we have already started sampling right now. We're doing weekly sampling where we're ramping up to start doing daily sampling, and that should start occurring soon. And once we take over the daily sampling, those results would also continue to be posted. That information will also be evaluated by Department of Health, and we have a agreement with EPA that allows us to actually do this ramp up and provide us with the results in a timely fashion by working with their laboratory at Fort Meade. And so we'll just start that up and continue that work for the next 8 to 12 weeks. Also beginning in March, we'll be evaluating, going out doing our daily surveys for fish and wildlife surveys that we normally do as the season starts coming about. And we'll just continue those and see what type of impacts we'll have short-term, medium-term, and long-term as we move through the rest of this year. What this slide shows here is kind of gives a little context or history of sampling that's been done in the past and how E. coli levels have varied over the years. So the slide on your left, 2011, those were results that we taken at the various points, the 6 sample points that you see on the slide, and you can see what the average result was of E. coli samples in 2011. What shows in 2025, those same sample points that we've done shows, again, the levels that were typically seen at those sites in 2025. And as you can see, the levels are pretty comparable to what you would normally see in this type of river. Next slide. So this is the current sampling that we've done in the last 2 weeks, going now into our 3rd week. And these were the results we saw starting the week of February 9th, 2026, and then the sample results from last week, 2017. So again, typical results all shown below the 410 recreational level, and we will have our results for this week on Friday, and then those samples will get posted. What you see on the map shows the sample sites that DOE are doing, which are in pink, and then the sample sites that DC Water is doing in blue. So we tried to do samples that kind of, a few samples that would line up with the sample areas that DC Water is doing. And then we're also doing additional sampling up the Anacostia. Since the focus has been the Potomac, we're going to actually be sampling on both rivers. So a total of about 10 sample points between DC Water and DOE. And as we continue, we envision continuing to sample those same points.
So last week, Mayor Bowser requested a declaration of emergency from FEMA. In that declaration, we have a number of different ways that we have requested support. The federal agencies are working with us to help us with tasks that we need done. The DC Water team, as you've heard, has mentioned a number of federal agencies, the EPA. Director Jackson mentioned the EPA. We also have FEMA on site with us, working out of the Emergency Operations Center just up the street, providing coordination with the federal agencies. We have the Environmental Protection Agency helping us with testing and technical support. We have a number of other federal agencies, like the Corps of Engineers, who have already begun under their own authorities doing work at the site to protect that site and allow DC Water to move swiftly and effectively with the repairs as they've been outlined. We have also requested a number of other actions from our federal partners, things like looking at the preparedness of the Washington Aqueduct, focusing on support and remediation for the canal and that area, as you've heard about today, but also support for the DC Water's Clean Rivers Project and some protections for the Blue Plains wastewater treatment facility that we've been working on over a number of years that we'd like to see continue and expanded to protect that site going into the future. So that's all part of a large request for federal support that the district made and that the president through FEMA has approved. And we will continue to do damage assessment and work with our partners to identify ways for our federal partners to help along the way.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Bennett from DC Health. I'm joining you to help understand a little bit about what we think the health impacts might be and what our concerns were. So as you can imagine, my initial concern, and that I imagine of most of you, was what impact this was going to have on the drinking water. We were very lucky, I think, that this break and the entry of the sewage into the river happened well downriver of where our water intake is. The Little Falls intake, which is used at other parts of the year, was closed, so that wasn't involved. That doesn't impact our water, even though it was downriver of the site. Our water is coming from upriver of the site, and that area has been tested and was not impacted and didn't have higher levels. So our drinking water wasn't impacted, and I will just clarify for everyone that that's all the water that's entering your house. So that means your shower, your dishwasher, your washing machine. So the water that you are using on a daily basis has been taken from the river, cleaned at the aqueduct, and delivered to your home without any impact of this sewage spill, which is a very positive thing and does decrease our concern about health significantly. So the systems are separate. I've learned a lot about our sewage system, you can imagine, in the last several weeks, and I've learned a lot about our water. So the separation between the two systems, the location of the sewage break in relation to the water intake, and the fact that the sewage went into the water, and then we can really prove with data flowed pretty predictably downstream from that site, are all very reassuring. The Little Falls intake is not open at this point, wasn't open this time of year, and when it does open, we will have gone through many months and testing, and we will be able to have some good assurance by that point that it won't be affected before it's needed. And the Washington Aqueduct and the Army Corps of Engineers are involved in this project, so we will hear more from them in the future as that is strengthened, but at this point we don't consider that to be involved in any way, and I feel very confident that your water is safe and there are no health impacts if you have been drinking the water. I will note for folks that that means that we are not asking you to, and there's no benefit to you boiling your water. There's nothing there other than what was there 2 months ago. It's normal water. So we have done an advisory. The advisory is about contact with the Potomac River, not about anything to do with water that has already been processed. We've asked people to avoid contact, and that means swimming, wading, letting your dog play, all of the ways in which river water might get on you, on your hands, in your mouth, and that means personal boating. We've also asked people not to do fishing at the river and having their pets, walking their pets along the river. The reason we've asked you to not to do those things was not because we had testing to show there were huge amounts of bacteria in the DC waters, but because we had a very unprecedented event, and the river was low, and we needed to understand what the flow was going to be like under different conditions and how this was all going to move, we asked everybody to pause. We've had many weeks of testing since then and have gotten to watch what happens when it rains, when the snow melts at various times, and so we are looking at that advisory, and we have had about 21 days since that last overflow, where we did see a really small blip down in DC waters from that overflow event that happened on the 9th. We have seen nothing like that since and have seen decreases into our normal range that have been consistent and stable. So we are going to lift our advisory about contact with the Potomac in the DC waters. I'm not speaking to Maryland or Virginia, but in the DC waters, we consider it safe for you to have contact with the Potomac, and that advisory will be announced as lifted on March 2nd. Just a reminder, that does not mean go swim in the Potomac. You're already not supposed to swim in the Potomac. These are advice, not It is already, the advisory is advice. This is actually the law. It is not legal for you to go swim in the Potomac, so please don't do it. I am not advising that. Thank you. So the message is that the drinking water is not impacted. There's no overflow into the Potomac right now. When we did see overflow, we watched it come downstream. It didn't have a huge impact by the time it had arrived at DC water and at DC jurisdictional waters, and it has not since then. And we are monitoring for E. coli. Both DC water and DOE will continue to monitor, and we don't feel like there's further need for an advisory. We're going to have a couple more days, and then it will be lifted on Monday.
So there are a number of sources of information that you can go to right now and continuously to get good, approved, vetted information. DCwater.com, these community meetings, and the Department of Energy and the Environment has frequently asked questions about weekly water testing and updates posted at doe.dc.gov. And I think that's it. I think we're turning it over to Sherry for
Absolutely.
questions.
So this does conclude our technical portion of the presentation. We certainly will post this information on both the mayor's website and the DC Water website, and of course those related agencies who have frequently asked questions and other details about maps and data points where we're doing testing. This is really why you are here. While we gave you the information and wanted to ensure that you had an opportunity to hear from each one of us about what occurred since the 19th, we really do want to listen to your questions, understand your concerns, and really stress that this is not your only moment for engagement with us. This is the first of a series of community meetings that we will have. We are committed to continuing to update and bring together the entire complement of entities who are working to address this matter. So at this moment, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry Lewis, who's going to help facilitate the question and answer portion. Thank you.
Let's see. Hello? Good? Okay, there we go. So we do have the cards that Kirsten mentioned earlier. You're welcome to write your questions down. We have folks that will walk around and pick those up for you. And if you do want to ask the question yourself, we have somebody with a mic here who can come to you. We do have some questions that are coming in on the phone. We also want to let those folks who are watching it know that they can also submit questions if they would like. They just need to do that by phone. So there is a phone number that they can call. It's 844-881-1314, and then you'll need to press 0 to be able to put in a question. So again, that number is 844-881-1314, and then press 0. So we do have one question that has already come in from one of our folks on the phone, and this one I'm going to direct to Dr. Bennett. And I think you've sort of addressed this already, but we want to make sure we address this person's question specifically. We have Chris from Ward 6 asking, will the spill affect my skin, my teeth, my hair? Can I wash my clothes?
Okay. So the water in the Potomac has different levels of bacteria in it depending on where you are in the Potomac. So whenever we're asking that question, we need to be a little specific. I would not recommend at the level we're at now, which I think last I saw was in the several thousands, but it might be even lower. It's lowering pretty steadily, going into the Potomac near the spill, because there are E. coli and we know that there are some staph there. That would possibly give you a skin infection. If you got it in your mouth, it might make you sick. By the time it has joined with the river water, it dilutes really significantly. Bacteria also are dying over time as they're not replicating a lot in this cold water. So by the time we're getting down to the DC waters, as you're getting to Fletcher's Cove and below, we aren't seeing high levels. So then the contact with that water, we don't think you're going to have any risk for, which is why we're raising the advisory. I still wouldn't go swimming, right? That's not legal. But if your dog splashes in the water, if your kid splashes in the water, you're okay. The water in your house that you're washing your clothes with and taking a shower with, that is from a separate line that is drawn from above the spill, and therefore it is not impacted by the sewage at all. And so that water is the same water that you had in December, and the same water you've had and felt safe with before this, so that you can just continue to act as you normally would.
All right, great. Thank you. And does anybody out here in the audience have a question? We can bring a, yep, go ahead, keep your hands up, and we'll have somebody walk over to you with a mic. And again, hold your hand up if you have a card that you would like to also ask some questions. Real quick, I did want to say that we have had some great outreach from our community members who have ideas they want to share, tips they want to share, help that they want to give, bringing crews food and things like that. So we really do want to thank the community for that. We even had an offer tonight from Captain Tim, is it Blanchard, I think, offering to provide some help with the testing. So we'll make sure we put him in touch with the right folks to see if there's a way that he might be able to assist. So go ahead with your question over here.
Hi, my name's John. I live in Ward 1 as a DC resident. I have some concerns about the long-term ecological impacts to the grasses, the fish, kind of the overall ecosystem. I think there's been a lot of talk about coordination with agencies and a consultant was hired. Can you be a little bit more specific about how the long-term health is going to be maintained in the river and how the request for federal assistance involves that? Thank you.
I think that's probably one for Director Jackson, and as far as federal assistance, maybe for HCMA as well, for Director Osborne.
Yeah, I can answer too.
Sure, so I'll start it off. So in terms of how we plan on evaluating the risk that exists long-term, again, still continue to looking at the sampling of the actual water itself. We're also planning on looking at, what potentially could have resided or affected the sediment in that area. We'll be looking at the fish population. We'll be looking at the animals along the river. So those monitoring conditions will start in March. The sampling will continue throughout. We don't plan on letting up on the sampling anytime soon. Like I said, we initially we're going to be going into a daily sampling format starting next week, and then that'll continue for several months. And then we're going to be watching through our biological group and our wildlife group what's going on with those kind of things. And then we're also maybe looking at the sediment that's along the river that could potentially have been impacted by it. In terms of those other ecological things, we'll be working with DC Water in their overall rehabilitation plan and seeing what that plan looks like. So that plan has to go through National Park Service, MDE. We'll also look at it as well. Army Corps of Engineers has a play in that because of the actual riverbed itself. So all these agencies will be involved in establishing what that rehabilitation plan, both for the short, medium, and long term, and how that will be affected.
And before we get to you, Director Osborne, maybe if Amanda can also talk a little bit about sort of the restoration process as well and the things that we'll be doing.
Yeah, so a lot of that was covered, kind of what they're going to be doing in the district. Obviously, kind of the major impact is in Maryland. So we're going to be working really closely with MDE on that in terms of what exactly we'll need to do there long term. Right now, the focus is really on getting out there as fast as we can and getting the majority of the items cleaned up so that we're no longer having any continued pollution to the river. And we're going to be working on all those other long-term aspects as we move forward.
Okay. Right. And did you want to talk about I think you had a question about funding, is that correct, with the yeah. So how would federal funding tie in, Director Osborne?
You want to be specific about the plan in terms of what we're going to do?
Yeah, I've heard about like daily sampling, but that's not an action, that's just monitoring. What is the recovery that's planned?
Right. So what we're planning to do and what we want to get out there to do immediately is basically the removal of everything that is left behind from the flow. So we have a lot of debris that's still out there that's mostly in the drainage channel that runs along Clara Barton Parkway. And so it's really important for us to get out there and get that out. So it's going to be a lot of kind of small equipment removal. We're going to try to use mini excavators. It's going to be a lot of hand removal and raking so that we're not disrupting the vegetation that is there and that's healthy, and things like trees. And so that's going to be basically what we're going to get out there and do first and foremost. And same with the canal, getting everything out of there as well. And then we'll be doing a longer term rehabilitation to include replanting, reseeding, making sure that the streams are working as they should be.
Okay. We're going to take some cards that we also received as well, and then I'm going to go to some of our folks who are calling in. Sorry, let me put my glasses on. This is asking, how will DC engage high school students who would also like to understand this moment, as well as become educated on our river or our environmentally complex issues? And this comes from ANC Commissioner Marquita Bryant from Navy Yard.
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think that there's a lot of education that goes on our rivers and on our environment. But that's a really interesting question and something we will take as a note as we go through this. I think where all the agencies are right in front of you, and some of those seated in the audience are really focused on emergency repairs and the emergency protective measures that we need to put in place to control and stem the issue, which I think has been pretty effectively explained here. But that's a great idea, and we'll take that back as a note.
And certainly, I think for DC Water, it's important to note that we already have a team who is dedicated from kindergarten all the way to high school that is engaged with our schools. And certainly that community affairs director will take this information back. We certainly want to make sure that as we engage individuals, especially high school students, about apprenticeship opportunities and thinking about DC Water as a place to work, but it's also an opportunity to make sure they understand the connection to what we do. So when we're talking about, everything from the life cycle of water, this is an important nexus to ensure that our curriculum that we partner with the DC Public Schools on can tie this in to ensure that there is a thread of education and what we already do in the classroom.
Okay. I have another question on the card here. What other diseases are getting tested for other than E. coli? And this comes from Daniel. I'm not sure if Dr. Bennett would like to handle that, or Amanda.
I'll start, but I'll let other people jump in. So E. coli is called an indicator bacteria for good reason, because it grows well and it is invariably there. It doesn't mean it's the only thing there, but at the levels that we're concerned about, if the E. coli is there, we know there are others. We are looking for a variety of different infections. We scan what's happening in our ERs and other health facilities in order to be sure that we will know if people are coming down with illnesses. We are aware that there is Staph aureus in the water. There are always other GI bugs. So the normal bacteria of your intestine are a lot of the same bacteria that cause you illness when they are in too high a number or the wrong kind. So we're looking for a variety of things. We're also looking for a few things like hookworm and other things that are really unlikely, but we want to be on top of it. So we are looking in terms of illness for a wide variety of things, but you can let people know in addition if there are any additional testing. But E. coli is an indicator for a reason, because it helps us to figure out how much of the bacteria that we already know about that are in the gut are actually in the river.
All right. I think that covers it probably.
Okay.
And we'll take the question over here. We could have the folks with the mic outside. Here, go ahead and take the question. And then we'll go to another one with the card and from one of our callers.
How you doing? I'm Captain Tim Blanchard, Fish to Potomac Fishing Charters. I know you addressed what I asked on the card before, but as fishermen, we're excited to get back out there and fish again. We measure flow, and you guys have talked about flow a couple times, but I pay particularly close attention to the flow of the river because it has to do with the bite of the fish. Right now, the most recent reading was, I think, 20,000 CFS. Could you maybe translate that to everyone else as far as how much water that is flowing through the river? Because I think it's like 14 billion gallons a day. Is that right?
Let me understand your question. You want us to sort of explain sort of the amount and volume of water in the river as it relates to this incident and how much actually contributed to the flow of the river?
Is dilution the solution?
It is.
Let's see.
Yes.
I'm not sure, Amanda, would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see from our sampling data and what the district is doing that as flows increased, we had significantly lower levels. So basically everywhere except for our site, they're returning to those background levels. And so flow is a huge aspect of what's happening and what's there. We see after rainstorms a lot. We'll see with overflows and stormwater going in a spike in these E. coli readings, but then quickly we see them go back down again because of the increased flow.
So, Amanda, could you expand a little bit more on that sort of variability and fluctuation? I think that a lot of people may not understand how widely those fluctuations can be in the Potomac River and in the Anacostia.
Yeah, so kind of based on sampling data that we've done and the other folks have done, we do see variable data. We see, I think Matt mentioned, in the 5 to 10,000 range. So although the 410 criteria is a marker for, I guess, quote unquote, what's safe, we see variability, seasonal variability, things that happen with storms. Especially in the summertime, we'll see a lot of increased and higher levels, depending on the flow, obviously. And just sampling itself has variability in terms of just what you grab at that time.
I just want to clarify one thing on this question. So the waters around DC return to those recreational levels with little spikes around weather very quickly. So dilution happened by the time it got down to us. So it wasn't so much that it's sitting there undiluted. So it did dilute, and it definitely diluted more as it moved further downstream. So we've had relatively stably low levels, but because we weren't sure about whether the flow was consistent or whether there'd be overflows, that is why we did an advisory that lasted so long. So the dilution happened immediately, and it continued both as the substance came down the river, right, because there's more unaffected water as you come down, and as time went by. So there's less there to even enter the river, to be washed down. So it's not that we are expecting it to dilute more in the next 2 days. It has been diluted. It dilutes as it moves downriver. You all know this. If you threw something in the river, you throw salt in the river, you don't expect it to be salty 2 miles down. It's the same thing. It diluted right away. It diluted more over time. But because we weren't sure of the dynamics and we want to see what will happen, we wanted to be extra cautious. But DC waters, you should be comfortable.
And on that note about being extra cautious, there's a question from Sophia in Ward 3 from the phone asking that will water be safe on March 2nd, which you mentioned earlier, for sports teams to compete on the water on the Potomac?
Yes. Enjoy, Sophia.
Okay. And then we have a couple questions regarding sort of the construction process, the repairs. So we had a question asking about the repairs and using that geopolymer that Matt had talked about earlier, and will that provide structural integrity to this pipe?
It will. We'll apply several layers of geopolymer. In some cases, we will reinforce it with mesh. But that is the emergency repair that will be done by the middle of March. So that will restore structural integrity to the pipe. And then we'll move into the permanent rehabilitation phase, and we may employ a method like slip lining. But the pipe will be in good shape for us to return flow into it after we apply the geopolymer. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And Matt, geopolymer is a really fancy term, but I think you called it, you described it like something else earlier that maybe us non-engineers.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a sprayed like concrete. It's very corrosive resistant. So you can imagine in sewers, there are gases, they corrode materials. Geopolymer is very, very corrosive resistant.
All right. And then, obviously DC Water, like much of the country, has aging infrastructure. And so we have a question from Maurice. I'm sorry if I'm not reading your handwriting right. It looks like Lethbridge from Navy Yard, asking if this section of the Potomac Interceptor was 60-plus years old. What does that tell us about the rest of DC's sewage infrastructure, the viability and the safety of that? So, Matt, if you could talk about sort of what DC Water is doing as far as rehabilitating sort of the rest of the system and what we're doing to maintain and inspect it.
Sure, thank you. So we do have some very old infrastructure, and the condition of it largely depends on the time in which it was built. We have some very, very old brick-lined sewers that are in really good shape, and then we've got some newer sewers that have where we've experienced some corrosion. So what we've done is we've put together a 10-year capital plan. Our board is considering it right now. It's about $10 billion that we will spend over the next 10 years. And what we've done through the leadership of our engineering department is we prioritize these assets based on the consequence of failure. So what happens if something fails, and then the risk of failure. So we're trying to figure out and prioritize the assets where they need to be addressed, so that we don't have something like this ever happen again.
And Sherry, can I just add on one point of that? It's really important for everyone to note that we ensure that all of that information is on our website. So all of those major projects, you can go down and look and pull down information about the construction schedule, what the value is to your community, where we're coming to ANCs to talk about that. So the engagement effort is there to ensure that you can learn everything about the cost of those projects, what we're doing through our finance and rates committees when we're going to be talking about that. So that is another continual source of information that we want you all to know is available on our website that describes really in detail about each one of those major infrastructure projects.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to another question here from our callers. We have Mr. Thomas from Ward 4 asking, will the final remediation plan be shared with the public? And if so, where will they be able to find it? Kristen, do you want to take that?
That is another fantastic question. What we have committed to from the beginning of this project is really, or this incident, excuse me, is to ensure that every piece of information we have, whether it is the amount of boulders that we're experiencing, the crews that are doing the work, the concerns that you all as a community have raised, we are being transparent, and I know that word can spark a lot of controversy, but we are trying to ensure that you can access that information. So the remediation plan is another critical element of this entire project. And certainly what we want the community to walk away with today is that that will be done in partnership with those entities who will be assessing whether or not what we have proposed is the final plan. Those are the entities that you as a community can engage to share your opinions. We, as I said at the beginning, are very committed to this not being the first and only meeting, but this being the first of a series of engagements. And I think the environmental remediation plan is the next phase of that community engagement. It's another critical point where we want to make sure anything that looks very technical, that we can break that down and make sure you understand it and do have an opportunity to engage not just us, but those partners about what you would like to see happen as we move forward.
All right, thank you. Can we get another question here from the audience?
On this side.
Getting a mic to you.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Alexander. I'm in Ward 5. I received a notice on my door today from DC Water about the water being shut off for at least 8 hours on Friday. Is there any relationship between that notice and this incident? Because the notice has no boxes checked off to explain why the water is being shut off.
Sure. Thank you for the question. No, it's not. The notice would have been for emergency or high priority repair on the water system in your neighborhood. It's not related to this incident.
And I do have representatives who are here with DC Water. You see several of them in DC Water logos. If you can make sure you give us your address, we can, even in real time, obtain information about what might be happening to ensure that you get clear directions and understanding of what the work is we're doing and the impacts.
You beat me to it. I was just going to say that, to get the information to our team, and we'll check it out for you. We have a question over here. I think if
Right here, Sherry.
Right here. Yep, we got one right here. Okay.
Great. Thanks. My name's John Spahn. I'm the River Commodore for the Pentagon Sailing Club. And during COVID, we had 3 different sets of rules. I guess my question is, and I'm delighted with what you guys are doing and the information here, March 2nd, the advisory's finished. Is that going to be for everything, Maryland and Virginia also, or are we going to be dealing with 3 different jurisdictions?
So you will be dealing with different jurisdictions, but that is not because we're uncoordinated. It's because the river flow is different. So up near the site, That would be Maryland, and I don't know what they're going to recommend, but the levels are not. So the levels are in the thousands near the site. They're in the low hundreds once you hit DC. So, you know, they will vary after a storm or something like that. But for the most part, once it reaches the DC waters, which is 4 miles of dilution, it's different. What's going to happen, I don't think Virginia is making recommendations down this low. They've made some recommendations closer to the site, but realistically, the data is much different closer to the site. So I'm talking to them, and I'll know what they're doing, but we are going to do different things because we're in charge of different parts of the river. If Virginia and Maryland differ, then we'll talk, but it's a river.
All right. I have a couple of sort of related questions also from the audience here that I'm going to bring in. Matt, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but we have a question asking what's being done to assess the rest of the Potomac Interceptor for any type of issues or breaks. So if you could answer that, and then I've got a related question.
Yeah, thank you. It's an important asset. It's 54 miles long. So one of the first things we did, well, the first thing we did was work to stop the flow into the Potomac River. We also launched a project to investigate 22 high priority areas that that may be susceptible to corrosive gases and that having an impact on the sewer. And so we launched an effort to reach all of those 22 locations. The data's coming in. We're analyzing it. To date, none of the data has led us to an emergency situation or a situation where we need to act immediately. The other thing that we'll be doing is building on the inspection reports that we have on this asset. We're going to be inspecting it from starting at Dulles Airport all the way into the district line, just to take another look at the asset and make sure that there aren't any emergency situations.
Yeah. So this is sort of related to that in this next question, but I also will want to bring in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We're fortunate to have one of our partners in this, Colonel Francis Para. And this is asking, what if something else happens to the Potomac Interceptor, particularly if it occurs above Great Falls, which is where those intakes are. So, Matt, I don't know if you want to answer first, and then I'll walk over here and we'll get Colonel Para.
Sure. I mean, the number one thing that we're trying to do is prevent another emergency, right? And that's one of the reasons why we're doing the increased amount of inspections. Is there? Somebody's waiting.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
If you give us just 1 minute, let's. We're going to have Colonel Para talk about the impact if something were to occur.
The other solution is to have bypass pumping on standby. That's something that we did in this case, that we were able to get the bypass pumping in place in order to move the flow around the break. So that's an emergency measure to have bypass pumping available.
Okay. And again, I think this is in part a drinking water question, right, and the impacts it might have on the intakes for the Washington Aqueduct. We have a mic over here. Colonel, if you'd like to maybe answer that question and what steps you might take.
Sure, I'll just take this. I got it. You sure? Okay. No, hey, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to participate tonight. So if we did have an incident that happened, north of the Great Falls intake, which is our gravity feed system, this is not unprecedented territory, right? We've been in a situation before where we've had July 3rd, 2024, right? Unprecedented algae blooms in the Potomac River. We responded as a team, right? So it was a collaborative group. We had to do a lot of these things in partnership with, not just our wholesale customer board as far as getting the message out, but also kind of working with the EPA to be able to kind of make sure that, the conventional method that we use to be able to treat water, which is sedimentation, filtration, and disinfection, was all in line with kind of the amounts of treatment that we can use and the chemicals that we can use to be able to get it to treatable levels. In that particular instance, like I said, a very unprecedented situation as far as the high levels of algae that were in the system. We were able to, pretty much have all of that resolved before midnight on that particular occasion. It took a lot of work, but again, I don't believe that it's unprecedented for us to be in that situation, and there are procedures in place for us to do this collaboratively. We won't be able to solve every single situation, but we will attack them as a team.
All right, much appreciated. And ma'am, we're going to have him bring the mic back to you here, and I'm going to ask one very quick question I think that won't take too long to answer. We have a question here about what the cost is for this repair and what is being requested for this and the long-term repair of the Potomac Interceptor.
Thanks. At this point, we estimate that the total cost is approximately $20 million. That would include the emergency response, the bypass pumping, use of the canal, all the efforts there, as well as the environmental remediation efforts underway.
Okay. And ma'am, your question?
I'm former Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner 7C06 that covers Deanwood and Burville. I hear what you guys are saying, but I don't believe a word. Here's why. It smells like gas in Ward 7 when you drive around. Our sewers aren't properly clean. I watch DC Water come out periodically every 4 to 6 weeks and relieve the pressure off of our pipes over on Just Street Northeast. I watched you guys do things and tell the truth as an Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner. So what are you saying differently based on everything you guys said to make the public, especially Ward 7, believe that you got what you're saying? Because I think we need filters on all the showers. I think we need more filtration systems at our public schools because it's not adding up.
All right. We appreciate your current concerns. And again, if you want to get that information to one of our team members about your location, we'll certainly check that out. But then if, I don't know if somebody wants to answer the question just about some of the things that we're doing.
No, I was just going to say thank you very much for that, and I was going to say the same thing that that was said here. Also, we have tables out back as well when you leave that you can give us the information, and we'll take a look at whatever's going on. But if
It took 90 days for y'all to fix it. 3 months people was without cooking gas because they hit a water line and a gas line on the street nearby. So please, I've already emailed y'all. I've already contacted you. I've done all those steps. What is going to happen differently with this? You guys are saying you're giving updates, but are these updates really up to date? That's all I'm asking.
they are, ma'am, they are truly the real updates that are coming out. Everyone up here they're professionals, and we're doing the best that we can. And the men and women at DC Water are doing everything that they can. They've worked around the clock. They're dedicated to serving this community, and they've served it well. They've served the region well, and we will continue to do that day in and day out.
Okay. I'm going to just hit one more question here in a moment. I do want to answer one that I think I can probably answer very quickly, asking about whether the pumps being used in this are going to affect PEPCO bills for people in the district. These pumps are actually being fueled by diesel and other fuel out on the site, so there's no electricity or anything being used for those pumps. So we appreciate that. That comes from a Ward 8 resident. And then, let's see, we'll take one more, I think, maybe from the audience here. We've got one person right up here. And then what we can do, if we have not answered your questions, please put them on the card. We will try and put some information together and provide everyone with the answers that they want.
Hi, my name is Katie Blackman. I'm here representing Potomac Conservancy and our 42,000 supporters. In our February 9th letter to DC Water, we requested an independent investigation into the root causes of this particular failure. We think that's very important to create systemic change and prevent future failures, and we're wondering what DC Water's stance is on that request. Thank you.
We did get that letter, and we are going to when we are able to get down to where the pipe is at, which we're very, very close to, we're also going to continue to measure the pipe and understand what was the cause of this failure. And we do not know that as of yet, but as soon as we have that, we will let you know. And to make sure, and as Mr. Brown said, we are measuring that whole 55 or 54 miles of pipe to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But if it does happen again, we want to be prepared that we're in a position to make sure that we're able to be on top of it, just like we were this time. But we will continue to measure the pipes in that 54-mile region.
And I'll just echo that as we talked about, and certainly through the mayor's declaration, you have a host of partners who are on site who are helping to oversee this project. It's being done with the National Park Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA Region 3, FEMA, you have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So what DC Water's efforts are doing are not being done in isolation, and all of this coordination is really another safety for you all as residents who are concerned both about what our operations might be doing, and then also to ensure that there's a trusted source that you can lean on for additional options of information. So just wanted to echo what Mr. Gaddis said and to also provide that clarity about what's happening with the coordination from all the federal, state, and regional partners.
Okay. We've been asked to take a couple more questions, so we're going to just do two more from the audience. We've got one right over here.
Thank you so much. I'm Trey Sherrod. I'm here for Anacostia Riverkeeper, next to my colleagues here from Potomac Riverkeeper Network. For the Anacostia Riverkeeper and Potomac Riverkeeper networks have been sampling even before some of the agencies have been sampling. With an eye to the transparency question that was asked earlier from Ward 7, what funding has been discussed already to reimburse nonprofits for sampling that we did before the agencies were sampling themselves? And with an eye towards the transparency, so there's a third party in this, what funding is available or could become available for nonprofits that have a long sampling track record with DOEE, for instance, to do more water quality sampling going forward so that it's a third party that is trusted by the community and it's not the agency paying a contractor who's beholden to them?
Let me just clarify. Are you talking about sampling that you did, reimbursement for sampling you did in response to this, or for sampling that you have been doing
As
ongoing?
a response to this, we have been asked for by various contractors that do boat recovery. There was a big freeze thaw. A lot of boats went down at the same time as the sewage spill happened. They're not comfortable putting their divers in the water, obviously, with the sewage levels that we're seeing. We've been asked by DC Fire regarding their ice rescue training. We've been asked by Harbor Patrol. We've been fielding requests from a lot of city agencies, right? It's bad timing because the District Waterways Advisory Commission is just about to have their first meeting in 2 weeks. That body will probably take on a lot of this kind of coordination going forward. But we have been sampling, Potomac Riverkeeper has been sampling in advance of the agencies and in response to other groups needing input right before they could get in the water.
So let's go to the immediate funding, questions and water quality sampling. Matt, is that something that you might be able to address?
Trey, thanks for being here tonight. That's something that let's talk about it. Let's take that under advisement. Appreciate it.
Okay. And then I think our counterparts are here also, and I'm sure that would be willing to talk to you. Let's go to one more question. We have.
How about that youngster? Our follow-up question, what Trey was asking about. What about the economic impact on the businesses that rely on the Potomac River for the customers and everything else? What's going on with that? Marinas are having people cancel their slips for the summer. High school teams don't want to practice. What is being done about that?
So when you talk about high school teams and practicing, again, I think that, Dr. Bennett, if you could address that, the concerns about, crews and people worried about practicing on the water.
If people have specific concerns about an activity that they plan, they should reach out to us. I'm happy to talk to anybody about why we came to the conclusion we did when we did. People have different levels of comfort, and some people may need to wait and not be the first and watch what happens, and that is normal for health in general. So I'm not sure there's something we can do to make everybody at the same level of comfort at the same time. Okay. Oh, well, that's not my question. Yeah. 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 We hear your concerns, and we'll see that, they hear it, they understand it. I think that's something that needs to be discussed in the long term. So, and one more question. I think I saw somebody over here. We haven't really gone this side of the room too much, so.
Does the sewage break increase the risk of algal blooms during the summer?
Okay.
Thank you so much for your courage in standing up and asking a question. I am, as we talked about, I think that's an echoing what the high school student said. So now I'm going to be looking at Stephen to say, okay, we've got to go make sure we get into schools to add this to the importance of this topic. But I think Colonel Parra talked about what the Washington Aqueduct is doing. It's certainly been a topic of all of the coordination that is happening to ensure that we're prepared. We mentioned the July 3rd incident that happened a few years ago. We've been trying to educate the community about the single source of the Potomac River and the importance of water resiliency, and that's a really important aspect. We know we don't want to have that happen again, so I know that the aqueduct is certainly very keenly aware to monitoring and getting prepared for any ecological issues that may impact the river coming downstream for this summer.
Can I give you a nerdy science answer for your nerdy science question? So yes, bacteria do take up oxygen, which then increases some of the risk of that. As the bacteria level goes down, that risk goes down. And so as we're looking at that 500,000 become 20, become 5, that risk goes down. So the dilution that's already happened within a couple of weeks, by the summer will have really, really happened. This event and the summer algal blooms, everyone I've talked to does not necessarily think those would be related, but we're watching.
And, since the Army Corps and Washington Aqueduct talked about that just briefly earlier, I want to get Colonel Parra again for a moment. I think you wanted to say a little something about that and how they handle those situations.
No, absolutely. So I would just say that what we learned from the last episode, and I would say that was unprecedented, right? We have people that were involved in the water industry for a very long time that never saw those conditions that we saw back in 2024. But what we've learned from that, really, as we had to go through that response, we've been able to negotiate really all the terms that we have to put in place prior. When we were going through that, we were very reactive. If we ever saw something similar at this point, and we do test every day, I mean, we're doing 300 samples a day in our EPA-certified lab. But as we're seeing anything at the intakes that kind of point us in this direction, we've already coordinated early approval with EPA to be able to do some early dilution at the point of intakes so that we can get everything to a treatable level. This is all lessons learned that we learned back in 2024, and I think all the partners are in line with giving us the authorities that we need to be able to get after this in the most effective way.
All right. Thank you very much, and we do appreciate, again, your partnership on that.
Can I just add one note? I didn't have a chance to jump in. To the gentleman that asked a question about the impacts to businesses, I don't know if he's still here, but look out for our businesses, especially our small business owners and operators. Look out for some outreach from the district government. As part of our ask the federal government, we did flag that we anticipated that our small businesses would have impacts and that would need some supports. And there is a pathway through the Small Business Administration for a similar declaration. What we'll be doing over the next couple of weeks as we get out of this initial repair phase is starting to assess with our small businesses what those impacts look like, how many businesses are impacted, the volume of that impact, and then we'll be working with the Small Business Administration directly to determine if this incident warrants a Small Business Administration declaration, which can provide some very low interest or no interest loans to businesses that are impacted to allow them to carry on their operation. So I just look out for that if you're a small business owner and operator. Look out for some additional outreach from us on that in the future.
That's good to know. Thank you so much. And I want to end on and unfortunately I know that we still have people with questions. We've got questions in the cards. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up. But again, we will do our best to try and... Unfortunately, we need to wrap up, just given the time limits that we have. So we've got your questions. We will do our best to try and answer those. And I'm sorry, sir, but we have a limited amount of time, and we have to abide by this time. So I understand, sir, but we also have some other time limits in regards. We can answer your questions. We have folks who are here. We have tables here. Folks can answer your questions when we conclude, but for all intents and purposes, we need to conclude the meeting right now for the broadcast time limitations that they have, okay? So, yes, and I said that after we're done, sir, we'll be here. We have folks who are here. They can continue to answer your questions. It's just we need to wrap up the broadcast section of it, and we have folks here who will continue to answer your questions. So I would like to end on a little bit of a positive note, if I could, because I do know that the people out here are appreciative of the work and the hard work that a lot of the people have been doing on this. And so we did have one member of the audience say thank you to DC Water staff and to the personnel from all of the agencies, all of those partner agencies that we have, all the agencies here in DC and in Maryland who have been working on this and to repair this break. So I want to thank you all for being here. Again, we will be around here to continue to talk to folks as well. So thank you very much. Kirsten to wrap up.
Okay, so to the gentleman in the back, one of the things that we wanted to do is we certainly understand there are time constraints, but we have information tables for every aspect of this project, including our partners, so that you can get your questions raised outside of this time frame. However, we will stay around. This is another moment, not the last. This is certainly the first of many engagement opportunities where we want to ensure that all of your questions can get raised and addressed. So please feel free to walk outside to some of those tables. We will certainly stay around to avail ourselves, and I'll certainly turn it to Mr. Gaddis to close.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. I'll close real quick, and so everyone can get out of here. This has been a great meeting this evening. I appreciate everyone coming out this evening. We've had some great meetings out of the site. Today I spent some time with Chief EPA Lee Zelder. We had a fantastic time out there and taking a look at what the men and women at DC Water have built and what they've done out there and how they've been able to help us in saving the river that we all enjoy. But I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening. We will answer, as we said, we will continue to answer questions this evening, but we want to thank you. And next time we have another meeting, please come back again. We want to answer all of your questions. Thank you all very much, and thank you. Bye-bye.
We now return.
Welcome to the Meridian Sports Diplomacy Forum. We are so delighted to have all of you here. I'm Deborah Lair, the interim CEO, and doesn't that smell of popcorn as you come in really get you in the right frame of mind? So, thank you, TK and team. So, over 2,000 years ago, the Greek orator Isocrates observed that athletic festivals were created so that people might set aside their conflicts, come together, and renew the bonds that unite them. I think the ancient Greeks really understood something profound, that sports are an essential part of diplomacy. And that insight feels very relevant today. We're living in a moment of geopolitical uncertainty, global conflict that dominates headlines, widening disparities in development, and the growing polarization amongst nations. And against that backdrop, sports is not just entertainment. It's one of the few truly global languages that we have left. And throughout modern history, sport has been able to succeed where politics have stalled. You'll recall the ping-pong diplomacy that resulted in the opening of U.S.-China relations after a freeze of 2 decades, and Cold War rivals who competed on the Olympic fields, and to women athletes like the Williams sisters who were advancing conversations about opportunity and equality. Sport has really served as a powerful bridge across divides. And at Meridian, that's what we mean by open diplomacy. The idea that diplomacy goes beyond governments, it happens through cities and stadiums, through culture and commerce, through military, through mayors, through athletes, and through the communities that they inspire, and of course, through the fans. And for more than 60 years, Meridian has prepared leaders to navigate these ever-changing global challenges. And today's complexities demand more voices at the table, and there may be no more powerful common ground than sports. And it's why we at Meridian really feel so passionately about this forum today and appreciate all of your support in making this first one a success. We're entering into a decade of American sports diplomacy. The FIFA World Cup, of course, is here in North America this year, and we're excited to hear from the president of FIFA and others involved today. Next year is the Military World Games in Charlotte. The following year, the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Los Angeles. And then there'll be the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2034. So if you think about it, these are really more than sporting events. They're global stages for cultural exchange, economic engagement, security cooperation, and people-to-people engagement. And that's why today really matters. And there's no better way to frame this conversation than by highlighting two individuals that we'll hear from this afternoon who really embody this idea in practice. We welcome Gianni Infantino, who's the president of FIFA. He is overseeing a period of unprecedented global engagement through sport, from the World Cup expansion to the role of soccer, or probably football for some of you, for the role that it plays in managing fragile states, in emerging economies, and moments of geopolitical strain. He'll have a discussion with Hank Paulson, who you will recall was the Treasury Secretary during the financial crisis. And Hank is a leader who understands firsthand how policy, national security, and sports intersect. We'll also explore how sports shape cities and communities, how it intersects with military service and leadership, how public-private partnerships can drive impact, and how investment in sports can really foster global connection. But before we begin, let me just take a quick moment to thank those who really made today possible. This forum is hosted by Meridian's Center for Culture and Sports Diplomacy, led by the very able TK Harvey. Yay, TK. And it wouldn't exist without the commitment of our partners. Our congressional co-chairs, Representative Darren LaHood of Illinois' 18th District, and Representative Sidney Kamlager-Dove of California's 37th District, both champions of cross-cultural engagement through sport. And our supporting partners, FanDuel and the Strauss Family Office, whose generosity, thank you, yes, whose generosity helped to bring this important conversation to life. And our media partner, Axios, for amplifying the ideas and insights that we're sharing here today. And our content partner, GR Global Sports and Entertainment, whose leadership has really helped us in shaping this program. So to all our speakers, sponsors, participants, joining all of you in person and online, thank you so much. Meridian is a much stronger place because of your engagement. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, a leader, Andrew Giuliani, who's the executive director of the White House Task Force on FIFA World Cup 26. He's leading the United States approach to what may be the world's largest event at this stage, the World Cup, and he's aligning very big task, federal agencies, host cities, and international partners to ensure the World Cup advances not only sports, but diplomacy and economic opportunity. His work really touches upon many of the themes that we'll explore today, and we're delighted to welcome him to share his insights in kicking off our program. Thank you so much, and enjoy today.
Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, I like the intro music right there. Very, very, very nice. I got to tell you, I was really admiring over here, if you haven't seen it, and I haven't gotten confirmation yet, Deborah, you may know, but those seats that are right there, they look like the old Yankee Stadium. And I'm not talking about the Yankee Stadium from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, but from 74 to 2008. So anyway, whether it is or not, it brought me back to my childhood. So well positioned there in terms of getting this New York speaker ready to go here. But thank you for the warm introduction. And with 133 days until the largest sporting event in American history, in world history, it's tough to believe that we are this close. On behalf of the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, it is an honor to be here to speak with you as we prepare to host the FIFA World Cup. 500 million ticket requests already out there for the World Cup. That's as of a couple weeks ago, I think showing the incredible demand that is being signaled for this incredible event. And when you think of the amount of people that watched the FIFA draw alone, over 800 million. And you compare that to what we're expecting for the Super Bowl, about 150 million this next week here, it makes you realize just how big this World Cup is. It is the whole world that is going to be watching this. 1.6 billion people watched the final last time. I think in looking at the demand, we're going to have over 2 billion people watching the final. FIFA will talk to you more about this, but it sounds like over 10 billion views throughout the tournament just on their broadcasts alone. Pretty amazing. This tournament arrives, as you know, at an extraordinary moment in our nation's history, our 250th anniversary of our independence. And the fact that there's a game on July 4th in Philadelphia is truly, truly special. When President Trump established the White House Task Force last year, he set forth a clear mission: make this the greatest sporting event in history. Make it safe, make it secure, and at the same time, let's make it a safe and welcoming experience for fans and visitors and American citizens alike. Delivering a well-executed and successful World Cup is a massive effort. It represents the largest coordinated interagency sports operation ever undertaken. I was actually just talking to our Super Bowl federal coordination team today, and in hearing what they are doing for the Super Bowl and envisioning the fact that we're going to have to do this 78 times over 39 days, it hit home as it is 133 days away. So for the first time ever, we are, along with Canada and Mexico, hosting an all-of-continent tournament. The scope of this World Cup is truly amazing. 104 games, more games than ever, more teams, 48 teams, more host cities, 16 host cities, and more host countries, 3, than the World Cup, or really any other sporting event, has ever assembled. That requires incredible coordination that the task force is spearheading with over 30 federal departments and agencies, 11 U.S. host cities, state and local governments, FIFA, of course, and our other partners, as well as Canada and Mexico. The task force has actively mobilized all the players to support tourism, build small business benefits, and ensure smooth travel. Tough enough when you think of what it takes as a New Yorker to get from JFK to MetLife Stadium and then try to do that going down to Philadelphia and all the different tickets that you need to go from the LIRR to Penn Station, New Jersey Transit, then Amtrak, and then start that over in Philadelphia. Then you add language barriers on top of it, and you realize that even somebody who's learning English over 40 years can find it very complicated. But this signals to the world that the United States is not just the most welcoming, but also the safest country for global sporting events. Our major initiatives are based on this whole of government approach, and the coordination and collaboration have already produced historic and unprecedented results. Just to highlight a few of the results: $625 million for host city in the One Big Beautiful Bill, with the emphasis on law enforcement, safety, security, overtime. Department of State visa wait times for B1, B2 visas have been dramatically reduced in the overwhelming majority of countries. And the FIFA Pass, which the President announced with, I think, your final guest today, the President of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, in the Oval Office a couple of months ago, that went live last week to tremendous results. And I can tell you it went live last week to tremendous results because you haven't heard any bad stories about it. So that's how you know that, in fact, that it has. That's one that I lost a couple years of my life in terms of making sure that that was ready to go. And then also some of the main work we've been doing around security, specifically with CUAS. We hosted a summit. NORTHCOM, the Department of War, and the White House Task Force hosted a summit 2 weeks ago to work through federal resources, but we have been pushing $500 million in counter-UAS grants to host states and host cities, with the first $250 million designated for the National Capital Region, as well as the host states for World Cup games. On top of that, the Safer Skies Act, which was signed by the president last month, gives state and local law enforcement the authority to be able to mitigate against drones. I can tell you, in going around to all the host cities, the number one concern I heard from the normal security lead at the stadium to FIFA security to the NFL to the chief of police was mitigating against drones. And one of the main legacy items of this task force is moving forward, state and locals will have the ability to do that, not just for the World Cup, but long after the last goal is scored. Last goal scored by the United States of America, of course, by the way. Hosting the world during this historic year is a tremendous privilege and gives us a chance to show the very best of America, our hospitality, our innovation, our spirit, and ingenuity. American exceptionalism truly at its best. The FIFA World Cup is more than a sporting event. It's a moment of global unity. For 40 days, people from every corner of the world will come together, cheer together, and share in an experience that goes beyond borders and politics. Think, regardless of your background, regardless of your political persuasion, we as Americans will cheer our national team wearing that red, white, and blue. And that gives you an idea of just how great a moment of unity this World Cup can and will be. It's also an opportunity to continue to move the ball on growing soccer in the United States as we inspire the next generation of athletes, fans, and leaders. Just think of the progress that we've made from the 1994 World Cup, from sports leagues to the incredible work that has been done to continue to push soccer forward. This tournament is a rare moment when global attention shifts from world events to competition, excellence, and shared enjoyment. We're making sure that the experience is smooth, unforgettable, and safe. And our message to the world is simple. We can compete on the field while still showing American hospitality in all of our 11 host cities from coast to coast. We will do everything in our power to make these games, this tremendous World Cup, a safe and successful one. And in closing, I think about this, and you'll hear more and more about just how incredible this World Cup is going to be. But when you add FIFA with a president who understands how to host mega sporting events and believes that keeping Americans safe and fans safe, you get what is the greatest sporting event in world history, and that's going to be the 2026 FIFA World Cup. So again, thank you so much for the invitation. Wonderful seeing everybody here, and to the best sporting event in the history of the world, the World Cup. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Lindsay Sarah Krasnov, sports diplomacy expert and clinical assistant professor at NYU, Alex Lasry, CEO at FIFA World Cup 2026 New York, New Jersey Host Committee, and Amy Hopfinger, Chief Business and Strategy Officer at FIFA World Cup 2026.
It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. Thank you to our wonderful hosts and the entire team that have made this happen. Really excited to kick this off, so let's dive right in. Alex, Amy, I was hoping you guys could help us get a picture of the scene. FIFA World Cup 2026 is said to be the largest sporting event ever. 48 teams across 3 co-hosted nations, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, a month-long of football, soccer festivities. What does this actually mean in terms of operational and diplomatic levels, particularly given the different global stakeholders involved, the international standards, and a whole host of other partners and collaborators?
Sure. Good afternoon. When we set out to bid for the World Cup in 2017, we knew that this was an opportunity to do things differently, to do things on a much bigger scale. At that point, we didn't know that it was going to be an expanded World Cup. FIFA hadn't made the decision on the 48 teams, 104 matches.
That came a little bit later. But the opportunity to really unite a continent, so bringing Mexico, Canada, the United States together for this opportunity was really important early on, and has proven to be an unbelievable opportunity for the tournament. We had a very competitive process, not only in winning the bid in 2018, but then also to get to our 16 host cities. So the interest, the excitement, the opportunity across the three countries was there from the beginning, and that really set the tone for how the operational pieces of this have started to come together. The government, everything from the federal, state, local level, have all needed to be coordinated. We've got three countries that need to be coordinated, three heads of state that need to be coordinated in their messaging and in their enthusiasm for what the World Cup has to bring.
I think also you're dealing with, especially in the United States, you're dealing with, 11, 12, because we're two. States and then cities and jurisdictions, right? So like each, in the U.S., you've got the federal partners, but then the state partners have a ton of influence, and the city partners have a ton of influence as well. And so I think trying to make sure that across city, state, federal, and international, right? You're now dealing with countries coming in and playing and with all the scrutiny that then comes with. So you're kind of almost putting on a United Nations conference in 11 different cities in the U.S. And it's a big operational footprint, but I think what we've seen is, especially what we've seen in New York, New Jersey, is city, state, federal partners have all been working hand in hand to make sure that this is going to be not just a success on the pitch, but one off the pitch as well. And I think hopefully kind of creating a playbook for what is going to become this next decade of sports here in the United States, and trying to show the world that if you want to put on the best sports and entertainment event, you want to do it right here in America.
Well, so picking up on that idea of creating a playbook, the tournament is certainly going to put North America at the epicenter of sport and diplomacy this summer. But what kinds of long-term opportunities do you already see coming out of this at this point that can benefit the co-hosts moving forward?
Well, I think what you're first trying to do is be able to show that, the scale of these kind of events are able to go off without any issues here in the U.S. And, we haven't had a World Cup in 30 years. It's been, almost 30 years since we've had an Olympics here, our Summer Olympics here in the United States. So I think what we're hoping to show in the World Cup is the kickoff to this decade of sports, right? We've got the World Cup, Summer Olympics, there's a rugby championship thrown in there, we've got the Women's World Cup, and then a Winter Olympics. I think what we want to be able to show is that it doesn't need to be another 30 years before the U.S. is hosting a World Cup. Shouldn't be another 30 years before the U.S. is hosting an Olympics. And if you want to put on an event like this that is going to be an operational success, but also the biggest, right? We are the biggest market when it comes to media, when it comes to sponsorships. We like to look at ourselves in our region as the capital of the world. And so I think it's very important to show that we can do this successfully. And we're going to be the kickoff for that. And I think you're going to see this World Cup being one that is I think going to draw even more international fans and excitement than any World Cup we've seen, just because it's here in the United States.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity to meld some of the best in the business. So America does an amazing job at entertainment and mixing entertainment and sports. That hasn't necessarily happened on the global soccer stage. We've got the opportunity to do that. We've got the opportunity on the commercial side to increase investment in the sport, increase investment in the game, which obviously happens at a very high level at the World Cup, but trickles down to all levels of the sport. So what we have the chance to do here is groundbreaking. What we have the chance to do here is set a precedent for, as Alex said, what we kicked off technically last year with the Club World Cup in a decade of major sporting events. We like to say the World Cup is the biggest sporting event in the world. We've got an opportunity to welcome the world to the United States, and sports has a chance to do that.
Well, still staying kind of at this meta level, 16 host cities, from Vancouver to Mexico City to New York. And I wonder if each of you could speak a little bit with a few hard examples for us in terms of how you're working at your different levels to create some sort of coherent fan engagement experience and tournament identity while still being true to the kind of individual flair and football cultures of all those different host cities.
Sure. This was really important to us from day one. It's one World Cup, but it's 16 host cities. And we were very purposeful when we went out with a brand. We have a very generic FIFA World Cup brand that is, very tournament focused, very trophy focused. But for the first time ever, we've got individual host city brands. That's never happened before. We really wanted an opportunity for the cities to have their own identity. And while, the game is the same on the pitch, the dimensions are the same, the grass types are the same, and things like the competition pieces of it. So for a team and a fan moving from place to place, there's similarities, but really you get the opportunity to feel like you're in New York, New Jersey, or Dallas, or Vancouver, whether it's, the food that's served at the stadium, or the fan engagement, or the entertainment, or fan fest that's happening in the city. You feel like you've been to different areas, different parts of the continent.
And I think one of the great things that FIFA has been able to do is they've tried to set kind of the bigger marks of what they want, but then allowing you to put your own local flair to it. So they've kind of said, hey, we want you to have a fan fest, right? They've had that at every World Cup. They want you to have a fan fest. But where you put that fan fest, how you do it, that's on you. Like, you guys know what your community is looking for. We want people who are going to be welcome, who are coming to your shores to get an authentic experience. So for us, we're going to have we're going to have a 39-day fan engagement all across New York and New Jersey. So we've announced our Fan Fest at Liberty State Park. We've got our fan zones at Rockefeller Center and the U.S. Tennis Center. We're going to do, kind of city and state guides to make sure that people are getting the true, authentic New York, New Jersey experience. And I think that's something that is going to be unique to this World Cup that you haven't seen in others, which is, usually you've got one fan fest, right? So if the World Cup's in Germany, there's going to be one fan fest. Here, we're going to have 16 different fan fests. And I think that's something, is that right? Is that the right number?
Sure.
Yeah, 13 different fan fests
plus watch
around
parties,
there.
viewing parties. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, so like fan fests, and then, again, there's going to be all the regular viewing parties and the other fan zones that everyone's putting on. So I think FIFA's done a great job of trying to create the overall 30,000-foot fan experience that's going to be uniform, while also saying put on your local flair so that people can get a real sense of the community that they're in.
And just to follow up, asking you to dig a little deeper on that, to what extent, if at all, have the individual host committees been in contact with each other in terms of taking inspiration for, hey, you hear someone's doing this, oh, we could, do this, but have a different kind of spin that represents the more local on the ground, or is it just a little bit more siloed?
No, I mean, we talk all the time. We've got a call that we do all together once a week that's a little bit more formal, but then, we've got, text chains. I'm calling them all the time just to say, hey, we're looking at this. Have you guys experienced anything like that? Or we're planning to do this fan zone. How did you guys think about yours? Or I'll read something about, what Philly or LA or, Miami's doing and say, oh, that sounds cool. Can you explain that a little bit more to me? And, and we'll take that. I think it's also important, to go see other big events and how they're going on and how they go. So like Club World Cup was a big example of just trying to kind of see, okay, what's this rhythm going to be like with FIFA when we've got the World Cup going on? I'll be going, I always joke to my wife, I have to go to the Super Bowl for work. And I have to go to the Winter Olympics for work. I know it's brutal. But you do have to go see what the biggest events look like and try to take examples. we are in the event throwing business. The Super Bowl is the biggest event in the United States. The Winter Olympics is going to be the biggest event that happens before the World Cup. And so getting a sense of what are they doing, what's their hospitality, what's their transportation like, especially this one for me, being able to see how they go from San Francisco to Santa Clara is going to be important as we're trying to think through how do you get people from New York to New Jersey and vice versa. So talking to all the host cities, but also going to events and just kind of seeing how they work is an important part of the job. A fun part, but important part.
The knowledge exchange, for sure. And so kind of staying on this, you have a lot of conversations with different host city counterparts, but what kinds of lessons can you derive thus far in terms of the different layers of cooperation and collaboration that's been needed at the federal, state, and local partner levels to even get to where you are today?
Well, this doesn't happen without, this is going to be the largest public-private partnership probably in the country's history, right, to put this on. And so we need to make sure that our state, city, and federal partners are all working hand in hand. The president created the World Cup Task Force, which we've been able to coordinate on security measures, which have been extremely important in making sure that, these are going to be, the safest and most secure games. And then working also, again, when you look at, especially us on public transportation, right, our transportation tracks have New Jersey Transit and Amtrak all kind of running on the same track. You've got to make sure that, if an Amtrak train goes down, what is plan B? What are we doing? How are we all in communication with each other? You got to make sure maintenance isn't happening during the World Cup because we need the tracks clear and all of that. So, there's a lot of coordination between all the partners. This doesn't work without everyone working hand in hand, and it won't be successful without that constant communication. It's why the Club World Cup was such an important first kickoff. But we've been in contact with everyone for, I've